week's Tom Baker.
Hey.
Billy Idol for the opening music. Those of you who are listening to the podcast that can't actually watch it, you guys miss out on all the fun.
We can do all our hamming at the beginning.
Yeah. So we're live, and for some reason it's today the 10th?
Yep.
Sunday, August 10th, 2008. This is a public access television program. It's also a call-in show, so we'll have the number up for you shortly, where you can call in to talk about what we're talking about or whatever you'd like to talk about, including what you believe, why, where we might disagree, where we might agree, which is always a good thing to hit on as well. Discuss your evidence and reasons why you accept this idea that there's a God or gods, or that your religion is the one true religion. All of that is interesting things that we can discuss. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center that begins at 12:15. The doors open at 12 o'clock. The Austin History Center is located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. I did the August lecture, and it's online already, so the video's not. But the audio portion and the slides are there if anybody wants to download it. Is September Oak, or is Oak in October?
September's Oak.
September's going to be Oak DeBerg coming down to talk to us again about atheism in the military or religion in the military.
He's a colonel.
He is a retired colonel who we've had speak to us before. When we were at Ventana del Sol, it was outstanding, and I encourage anybody in the Austin area who'd like to hear an entertaining and informative lecture to come on down to the Austin History Center on the first Sunday of September to join in that experience. The lecture series is one of the things that the ACA does to promote education and outreach to the public. In addition to this program, by the way, the audio portion of this program is available for download as a podcast at atheist-experience.com, which you can get to from the main website, www.atheist-community.org. And the video portion is available for viewing at Google Video, and clips are up on YouTube, thanks to a lot of our enthusiastic fans and members. There's the address on the bottom of your screen now for the ACA website, where you can go to get more information about other things the ACA is doing, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about the show, how to connect to the stream live if you'd like to, and how to connect to the chat service that we run in conjunction with the program. We were live yesterday. It's hosted by Dennis Lubay, features myself, Russell Glasser, Schilling, and Thad England was on again. He's becoming a regular feature. We'll continue doing that and maybe adding new voices. It won't always be all five of us. Five's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't object to it, because these are people that I genuinely enjoy spending time with and talking, having discussions with. But five voices on a show is sometimes a little overkill. So that's why Thad's kind of been quiet on the last couple episodes, chiming in when he has something important to say, and it's worked out pretty good. And so we'll continue that. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information. We were live yesterday. We'll be live again in 2 weeks from 2 to 3:30 Central it's every other Saturday. There was an episode 2 episodes ago that we had to postpone for 2 hours because I got called into work on Saturday. And then I had a problem uploading the file. And so the podcast didn't get posted for a couple days, and holy crap. I love you guys.
Where's my podcast?
I love the fact that you guys appreciate what we're doing, that it's something you look forward to. And I realize that, with the nonprofits, 2 weeks seems like a long time to wait on occasion. Give me 2 weeks and like 2 days, just in case something goes wrong. I promise I'll try and get it up. At least
we're an amateur organization. We, getting this stuff online and stuff sometimes is tricky.
It's all volunteer too, which means in addition to the 50, 60 hours a week that I'm cranking away at work, I've got to do all the ACA stuff too. But I'm not complaining, because I love doing the shows. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I'd let somebody else do it. And we love getting the feedback. Both the shows, because they're in podcast form, are available to anybody in the world except for people in China and other places where your government or your company or your service provider has decided to outlaw atheist propaganda. And that's happening. There was a recent story about that where I don't have the details, I'm sorry, but it's evidently becoming a little more common that people block atheist sites. And one group did it. There's, I think, a story about it on the Atheist Experience blog, and listed it as an occult site. Boy, I wish they'd call me, because I pretty much think the occult is hogwash in the same way that I think religion's hogwash. So I don't know how we got in that category, but gosh, maybe it was the sacrificed bunny that we had on the Easter show, or the communion wafer desecration, or the fact that I'm wearing today, for those of you who can't see the show, a clerical shirt, complete with white tab collar right there, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. In addition to those programs and the lecture series, the ACA also hosts a weekly happy hour at the Dog and Duck Pub located at the corner of 17th and Guadalupe, and a number of other special events. And I'll run through them really quickly. August 15th, which is this coming Friday, if you're in the Austin area, we're going to play mini golf at Peter Pan. Oh, I forgot. Is it on Riverside? Riverside Lamar? Anyway, Barton Springs. The information should be available on the website. That's August 15th. September 6th, the ACA is having a fundraising garage sale. So if you're a member or someone in the Austin area and you've got, I was going to say junk, but high-quality merchandise that other people, they'd love to buy if they could only see it sitting on a nice green lawn. You can contact us at the ACA website for more information about how to donate the things to sell, and also come down and help out and do some shopping. Maybe you can buy somebody else's stuff. I'm sure that somebody has something you want, and you might have something somebody else wants. In addition to that, on September 20th, we are going to... is the ACA Bat Cruise, the annual Bat Cruise. We have booked the big boat. We would appreciate people to go ahead and register and pay in advance. There's more information at the website about how to do all that, so that we can make sure we've got enough people signed up, committed to go, paid, so that we don't need the funding for the boat. If you're in the Austin area, if you're in the Houston area, Dallas, if you want to drive in from out of town, as other people have done in the past, you're more than welcome to do so. In fact, you're encouraged to do so. It's a good night out. Austin has the largest urban bat population in the world.
It's one of our more popular social events.
Yeah, and we have a good time. No glass containers, but you can bring boxes of wine,
stuff to share. Yeah. Anyway.
Good conversation and a night out. And September 27th, the ACA, just 1 week after seeing a bunch of bats flying overhead, we are going to fly like bats out of hell and drive down to San Antonio to go to the San Antonio Zoo. Seeing nature and reminding us of the beauties and diversity of nature is always a good thing, and the zoo is a fun trip, and it's family friendly, which is one of the things that we're trying to make sure we do, is have more family friendly events. I mean, you can't take your 4-year-old to the Dog and Duck. You can, but it's not much fun for them to watch everybody sitting around drinking. So the zoo, along with the Bat Cruise and a few other things, are a few more
kid-friendly
adventures that are going to be kid-friendly. There may be more stuff coming up in the near future. There may be another Godless Pub Crawl in October. We're talking about now. A few other things are possibly in the works, but I don't want to spill the beans on anything too early. Thanks to everybody for tuning in live and around the world afterwards. I think I covered all of the regular announcements and all of the special announcements.
I think you did too.
So, and it took longer than normal.
But we're going to we missed one. I
didn't.
Bummer.
Thanks, guys. After this program's over, everybody involved gets together, or most everybody involved gets together and goes to dinner. And we're currently going to Threadgill's, the address on the bottom of your screen, 301 West Riverside. We're on till 4:30. We'll get down there around 5 and stay till 6:30, 7, whatever.
Yeah. We have a good turnout for those. We really enjoy chatting with our audience members.
Yeah, it's a good place to eat. Lots of fun. By the way, all of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person who'd like to attend, come down, meet us, find out what we're about. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to be an atheist. You're more than welcome. If you're coming down to preach, proselytize, provoke, punch, pick on, or any other P's, we've excluded P's.
Okay.
Don't bother. Just call in when we put the telephone number up on the screen. It'll be up shortly. Don's got some stuff to talk about, and I'm going to briefly explain why I'm dressed oddly.
Are you going to explain your dress now, or
yeah,
later? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll do it now. It won't take but a minute,
okay,
or two. I I'm wearing a clerical shirt and collar. This actually started because I did a guest spot on another public access show.
You developed a taste for crackers or something? Or?
The crackers got to me. They're like Lay's. You can't eat just one. I did a guest spot on another Austin Access show called Cooking Good. As a reverend, had a lot of fun.
You're not really a reverend, though. Right?
I'm ordained by the Universal Life Church.
Okay.
And the title that I chose, I believe, was reverend, but I'm not sure.
It was a checkbox, right?
Yeah, it's like a checkbox where you put Reverend, Father, Holiness.
To let people know that that's the level of involvement you have. Right?
So that's where the shirt came from. And after the show was over, I was still dressed in this and decided that it'd be really fun if I stopped at a local strip club wearing the collar and shirt. I won't go into great detail other than to say, boy, was that fun. One of the most amusing nights out ever. And I noticed even before I got over to do the first show that, I had to stop in and buy some supplies to cook with. And I'd already
holy
dressed.
Cooking oil?
I used oil that I had consecrated myself in order to bless the chicken, to drive out any, because I get my chicken from Haiti because our government's poisoning the chicken.
Oh, boy.
Oh, no, wait, I can't do that shtick here. But I noticed when I went out, people automatically looked at me and treated me different right off the bat.
Better?
Way better.
Oh.
Please cut in front of me in line. That type of thing.
Oh, wow.
How are you doing today,
we
Reverend?
should all get some of these, yeah.
It's nice, it's a beautiful day. And all smiles from people just standing in the aisle. And I understand that uniforms command respect, and often for very good reason. There's a reason why the military uses uniforms, and it goes to identifying authority and rank and encouraging discipline and encouraging uniformity so that you can instantly spot who the authorities are, so that there are fewer questions, there are fewer ambiguities. Police officers, the uniform commands respect. It's there for a reason. They are the recognized authorities for enforcing the law of the land, and I think in general it's a good thing that we tend to, I guess indoctrinate is about the best word for it, indoctrinate the public into showing at least some deference and respect towards these uniforms that are actually authority figures, because it goes to promote the peace and general good in society, and that's a good thing. There is absolutely no sane reason why this little white tab, and that's all it is,
piece of plastic,
should actually command respect or appear to be an authority. What people look at is they assume, oh, okay, it's a priest or a reverend or a pastor. It's somebody who's clearly a good person, who's doing good work, who's doing the Lord's work. I mean, if you were a thief, this is the best costume you could put on. Nobody's going to question you.
Or a pedophile, maybe.
This collar has been abused. We have instilled the public with an instant respect, and it applies to atheists too. I'm not immune, you're not immune. People see a collar, and we are trained from birth to, oh, there's somebody who's somehow better than me, who's more in tune with the spiritual or God or whatever else. And in turn, what we've done, because these people represent no actual authority, they represent no expertise. Do not tell me that clergy or theologians are experts in anything. Because everybody has a different view of what God is. Basically, you're saying that they're an expert in themselves and what they believe. Well, guess what? So am I. So I have just as much right to wear the collar. They're not experts, they're not authorities, and these collars have been abused. The deference that comes towards it has been used to justify all sorts of atrocities. The position of authority that ministers have has been abused in order to sexually abuse and mistreat parishioners, not just children, although that's one of the things that we end up talking about quite a lot, but regular parishioners. It's been used to exploit people out of money. It's been used to exploit people into doing sex acts for these people who, on occasion, have taken vows of celibacy, which I think is just absolutely one of the most moronic things. So I'm going to continue, on occasion, to wear the shirt and collar out in public, to kind of gauge how people look at me, how differently I'm treated, and report back, because they're making all kinds of assumptions. The one thing I'd like to say is that they generally assume that I'm a good person, and they got it right, but it has nothing to do with the collar. Right. And of course, it's lots of fun to go to strip clubs dressed like a reverend.
Well, you're like the personal embodiment of the argument from authority, right?
Yes.
Which is a logical fallacy, right? You don't necessarily listen to someone because they're an authority. You judge the facts based on what it is, right? Yeah. Whether it really holds water or not. And so, effectively, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, the words have to stand on their own. Right. And that's something we may address later, depending on the callers, because it's something that comes up a lot when we talk about the historicity of Jesus and Socrates and things like that. But,
yeah.
So what have you got for us today?
Well, let's see. There have been two recent Supreme Court rulings at the state level. One was in Texas here, and one was in California. And both of them have something to say about religious liberty. The Texas case expanded religious liberty within the state of Texas, I think. And I talked about that last month I was on. And this time I wanted to talk about the California case, which is about the same-sex marriage case. And there are people that claim that this particular case restricts religious liberty. And I wanted to examine that claim today. And so we sort of have a contrast between these two different decisions, one potentially expanding religious liberty, the other potentially contracting it. I don't know if that's true. So on May 15th, the California Supreme Court ruled that the state could not bar marriage of people of the same sex based on the state constitution. So that ruling only referred to that marriages within that state. And so just to get a feel for how people are responding to this, which is kind of almost hysterical, somebody had the quote, "Gay rights is just another tool in the effort not only to destroy religious freedoms, but to destroy Americanism and this nation." So
what is Americanism?
I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's...
And why is it a bad thing to destroy it? I mean, if you know what Americanism is...
Give us a call.
Give us a call. Yeah. Because, you know, I think we may be looking at a word for a euphemism for Christian nation arguments.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it's American exceptionalism, that we are better because we believe in God and we get to go out and screw everybody else over, you know, and make them believe in God. So I think that's really what was meant. So the question I'd like to address today is equality, especially gay rights, a threat to religious liberty? And I claim it's not. So I'd like to talk more about this decision, talk about some of the hysterical things that you see in the news where people were responding to this, which I think is amusing. And when we cut behind, and then examine this claim of threat to religious liberty in more detail, because I think that this claim is also hysterical, but it's a little more sophisticated in its hiding the fact. And then at the end, I'd like to talk about what's really going on and why there's this hysteria and what the implications are for religion. So maybe in the middle we can break for some calls and such.
Sure.
Same-sex marriage has been a major culture war issue, and the fight has been going on for years and will continue to go on for years.
We have our crack research team in the back has run over to Wikipedia to look up Americanism. And Wikipedia has listed it as an attitude or conviction which gives special importance to the nation or culture of the United States.
So I was pretty close.
Yeah, it seems more in tune with patriotism or the
it's
American culturism.
Sort of idea. Yeah.
So now that we know what it is, why is it a bad thing to get rid of it?
Yeah. Well, I'm not quite sure Americans.
And how is this getting rid of that?
Are by default better than other folks. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Change is bad. I hate change.
Okay, so in the history of the same-sex marriage issue, this has been going on a long time. There's been a lot of decisions as constitutional votes and as court decisions in various states. In Hawaii, there was a constitutional amendment to knock it down. In Vermont, they decided at a constitutional level to promote domestic partnership benefits, which are very similar to marriage, but within that state. By the way, none of this gives national benefits, and so this is something that the gays are trying to get, is sort of complete recognition of their rights to marry and such. Massachusetts, there was a big decision in the Massachusetts Supreme Court to to allow gay marriage, but then they made a decision not to allow people to come in from other states and get married there. And I'll explain why that's important later. And then Texas, we had a constitutional vote a couple years ago to prohibit same-sex marriage. I think there have been some other states that have had decisions in there. It's been a big issue. And then now the California Supreme Court has decided the issue based on personal liberty and equal protection. And there's a quote, let's see, I'm not sure it's worth going through the quote, but you can look up the decision online. So one of the big issues here is there is kind of a full faith and credit part of, I think it's part of the Constitution, but maybe just part of federal law that basically says, well, if you make agreements in one state, they're going to be valid in another state. So if you have a marriage in one state, it's going to be recognized throughout the country.
Right.
And that's just been how it has been. And so the
it has to be that way. If you lived in Missouri and you got married and you moved to Texas, it would be insane for Texas to say, "Oh, you're not married here.
You have to get married here."
It's part of the united part of the United States.
Right. Right. And so this basically means that marriages are recognized federally in a sense. So in 1996, Congress passed what was called the Defense of Marriage Act. I love the way they name these things. They're so disingenuously named. So anyway, this allowed an exception for same-sex marriage under this full faith and credit, and it had some other implications as well. But so the California case is interesting in that California is not barring people from other states to come in and marry. So what's going to happen inevitably is, first off, California is going to have a big booming marriage industry, and they're going to make some money that other states could have made. Oops. Many couples will want recognition, will go in there and get married and come back to their states and want recognition. They may not get it immediately. They most likely won't. They will most likely create court challenges within those states and run those challenges up either based on their state constitutions or based on the U.S. Constitution. And so there's going to be a whole plethora of lawsuits, we'll see. And then eventually all this will bubble up to the Supreme Court, and there will be most likely a decision there in the next 10 or 20 years on same-sex marriage. That's kind of how it's going to play out. The logic in these cases is very similar to the logic used in the interracial marriage cases. This is Loving versus Virginia, which was decided in 1967 by the U.S. Supreme Court. Does the state have the right to restrict who you marry based on some qualities of the people involved? And there's almost an analogy to be made, I think, to gay marriage, right? Is, if you're going to worry about, if it's wrong to say that the marriage between two different races, whatever that might mean, it's almost a meaningless term, really, you can't do that. Then what about sex? And so that becomes the question. So. So California and Massachusetts have ruled they have no basis to ban this sort of marriage, and so religious conservatives are very, very upset by this, and they want to stop it. And so you see all sorts of crazy stuff in response. So why would they want to stop it? Religious people can ask God to bless their marriages. They can go to church and have their church make their marriage sacred. And they can do all these things regardless of what happens with the gays, right? But by their very actions, by the fact that they want to go and meddle with the marriages of gays, who incidentally other churches are happy to marry, but it's just they can't, by their actions, they're admitting that their God cannot sanctify marriage, and their churches cannot sanctify marriage. So they're sort of admitting that that's not enough. It's not enough that we have, or these religious people have the ability to go ask God and have their churches. So they're effectively admitting that what is necessary to make their marriages valid is the denying that right to others, and that God is unable to do that. So they have to go and deny that right. So that's my take on it.
For me, there's like two separate issues here. When you say that somebody's married, there's married in the legal sense.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
Which is where the government has gotten involved, and it's a contract. It's the only one that matters in any real sense. It's where you get your. It's why there are subtle differences between domestic partnership law and marriage law. Essentially, you can get almost the same benefits through domestic partnership, but you have to jump through so many hoops that it's ridiculous. When instead it would be much easier for these two people just to be able to be married in the eyes of the law. That's what when people are saying that they're in favor of gay marriage, we're talking about with regard to the law. We're talking about equality under the law. There's no reason for people to have to jump through more hoops and fight like tooth and nail to get the same rights that somebody else has just because they want to marry somebody of the same sex. That's absurd. What the religious people are objecting to is a completely different thing. They're saying, oh, this sanctity of marriage, this is a God-ordained union between a man and a woman. Well, that's the other part of marriage. That's where some church has married you. You know what happens when you go get married in a church? The person who performs the ceremony has to sign a marriage certificate in order for it to be considered legal under the law. They have to be authorized to do that. All the paperwork has to be filed. There are two separate things. A religious wedding ceremony that you could call a marriage, even if it wouldn't be legal under the law. And then the legal aspect of marriage, which is what we're really talking about. And the religious people, what Don was saying, are essentially saying, oh, your legal marriage somehow affects my religious marriage because my God's too weak to protect the sanctity of my religious marriage and keep it separate from this legal thing.
Yeah, yeah. And nobody's trying to make, nobody at this stage or at this level is trying to make churches marry gay people. Right?
And they shouldn't.
That's a church-state separation
Yes.
issue. Churches can marry whoever the heck they want. But what's going to happen in practice is people are going to say, oh, I belong to this church, I'm gay, I want to get married, will you marry me? And that's kind of where we're going with this. The punchline is what's going to happen then, and that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But that's not the state mandating the church. That's somebody who goes to that church asking, right? So that's a completely different issue. Nobody, if you don't want to have a gay marriage, don't have a gay marriage.
Most of these things are business practices. I hate to break it to all of you out here who don't understand it, but churches are in fact businesses. They're nonprofit protected businesses that stockpile money and property. In this case, what are they afraid of? Well, if we're the local big shot church and we don't allow gay marriage, and there's a significant gay population in our area who'd like to, and some other church comes up and says, hey, we're all here about the love of Jesus and we don't care whether you want to get married to somebody of the same sex, all of a sudden you start losing some of your profits to this other church, and it changes the paradigm of what becomes acceptable with regard to religion. Yeah. I think the same thing is kind of true. The reason they're fighting this is they're afraid of losing their income, and I think this is one of the reasons why we had blue laws. Hey, I don't want to work on my Sabbath. This other guy who's a heathen who's willing to work on my Sabbath has a better chance to draw more income because he's doing more. So let's ban that so that I can have my day off and force him not to engage in capitalism and compete. I think that's kind of patently obvious right there what's going on. And I would say that I'm a proponent of you work harder, you earn more. And if I'm willing to work and open my store 7 days a week and you're not because you believe in some invisible man in the sky who will strike you down if you do, sucks to be you.
Yeah, you should have more business.
Yeah,
you're willing to do more work.
Yeah. How hard is that?
Well, I guess people need to realize too that capitalism is our national religion.
Yeah, that's American.
It's not Christianity. Anyway, so I'd like to point out some of the hysterics that have come up. I mean, people are just like up in arms about this gay rights thing, which I find amusing. So I just want to hit some of these. So let's see, the director of the Capital Resource Institute says, this is a very sad day for our nation and the democratic process. And she goes on to say, 4 arrogant, elitist, activist judges decided that they know better than the people how marriage should be defined. So here she's referring to the fact that there was a popular vote within California about defining marriage and restricting marriage to a certain minority or whatever. But you have a situation where you have a bunch of people going to vote on the rights of the minority.
Right.
And this is not how our country works, right? We protect the minorities, and if the minorities have certain rights as given by the Constitution, or the state Constitution, the national Constitution, that takes precedence. And that's just how that's America.
Yeah, this statement could only be made by somebody who ignorantly believes that we live in a simple majority rules society. That is simply not true. We live, first of all, in a representative republic. We do get to vote. Your vote matters, and I encourage people to vote. But it doesn't matter what the majority votes for if it violates the Constitution and the principles that the nation was founded on. The Constitution exists to protect minorities from the whim of the majority.
That's right.
You couldn't all get together as a majority and say, we've decided that atheists should be slaves. What?
As appealing as that might be to some people.
And likewise, you should not be allowed to get together to vote that somebody else cannot marry somebody else just because you object to it, or because your invisible friend objects to it. That's insane. They have rights and freedoms too. And just because you have the numbers does not make you right.
Yep. That's right. And we had that same sort of thing here in Texas, where we had a majority vote based on the rights of minority. Now, if Christians really believed in Jesus and they do unto others, then what about having gays, the majority of gays, vote on whether Christians can get married?
Ooh.
Wouldn't that be appropriate? And because of the exact same reason that you just gave, we can't have that. We can't have a minority, or we can't have a majority vote on the rights of others. That's just not how it works. So we have all sorts of quotes related to this. It's a blow to our government system that activist judges would use the judicial system and baseless constitutional arguments, not true, to push their radical political agenda on citizens. Radical political agenda.
Boy,
equality
you guys
is
throw in so many
radical.
buzzwords in your outrage. It's hilarious. Activist judges, radical movements. Yeah, it's radical. It is kind of radical in the same sense that it was radical to get rid of slavery.
Okay. So here, Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council says, it's outrageous that the court has overturned not only the historic definition of marriage, but the clear will of the people of California as expressed in Proposition 22.
More nonsense of the will of the people. Hey, here's a tip. If you don't want to marry somebody of the same sex, don't.
Right.
Pretty easy.
Right. So it's not being foisted on anyone. Here's something from protectmarriage.com, which is a conservative thing. They say, oh, well, you've got to have, this is from the top 10 talking points about same-sex marriage. The first one has to do with collective wisdom. And they say for Christians, the Bible is unequivocal on the subject, one man, one woman for life.
Hey, here's a tip. Your Bible is not the authority on what constitutes legal marriage, which is why non-Christians are allowed to marry in this country. As long as non-Christians are allowed to marry, you don't get to cite the Bible as the authority on marriage. As long as our Constitution is not paying deference to any particular religion, you don't get to use any of them. We have laws. Right. Marriage is a legal contract between two people. We have supposedly this idea of equality and freedom and rights that are being denied individuals out of ignorance and prejudice. That we're trying to correct the situation here.
Right. So there's another argument that kind of relates to this, and that is there's a slippery slope that supposedly establishing same-sex marriage as a fundamental right will undermine current polygamy laws and create a new legal precedent for anything goes forms of marriage. Well, when you put this Bible thing together and polygamy laws, it's like you better get your story straight, because if you go reading the Bible, marriage was like one man and however many women you could get your hands on, and concubines too.
How many wives did David have again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me the Bible's against polygamy.
And furthermore, traditional marriage tradition is a man owns the woman; she's property, right? And that's not. So what they're arguing for, based on tradition and slippery slope arguments and polygamy, is just complete nonsense, right? It's like they haven't even cracked their Bible, which is amazing to me.
If we let those homos marry people be marrying animals and have 4 wives, look, I'm going to marry Muhammad.
Together. Right.
Love you, Muhammad.
Right. This is pretty hysterical. So there's a woman by the name of Sally Kern, who's an Oklahoma lawmaker, who said that homosexuality poses a bigger threat to the U.S. than terrorism. So that's just
How?
Too funny.
How?
And she claims
what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Why isn't Osama recruiting gays?
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the big threat, what's
Yeah.
the big threat?
So
That you'll have nicer clothes and
yeah. So we'll come back to her in a minute. So I think these are all pretty hysterical, right? Did you want to maybe
nuts.
break for a call?
Yeah, he's calling from New York.
Okay.
Hey, George, you there?
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, it's terrific to talk to you, and Don, too, I believe.
That's
Yes.
right.
I'm a big fan, and not just in terms of size, up here in New York,
All right.
where I caught your show on Google Video,
Good.
and I have formed a small cabal, word intentional, of fellow atheists, and we catch the show whenever we can. We're also working our way through the nonprofits on iTunes.
Great. How you liking that?
We just had a big punch-up among ourselves after listening to the free will debate.
Oh,
We're sorry.
yeah.
You and Dennis and well, no, it's okay because the other half of us signed up for City of Heroes. So, it's kind of a win-loss situation. And by the way, I got your point in the follow-up show that it wasn't so much that this side or that side won the debate. It was a question of who made the more, shall we say, the more tight presentation. I think Dennis, in the sense that he was a little more rehearsed,
Right.
kind of carried that.
Yeah,
But-
and Dennis also come across as sympathetic too, because it was basically Dennis against the rest of us. And
Y'all
one
are
of the
beating
things,
up on poor Dennis.
one of the things
Right.
that we've discussed and discovered over the years since then, because that show comes up all the time, not just on nonprofits, but I mean amongst us when we're talking, is that, and we addressed this I think on a follow-up show, when we get down to brass tacks, when we talk about what actually is and what the limits of is, Dennis and the rest of us agree. It's just about what label we're willing to put on it and how much freedom there is.
Right. The one thing I thought could have been hit but did not. I don't mean to resurrect this thing, zombie-like to stalk the land.
Yeah.
But
Please don't.
We won't be doing it on this show.
is it the one distinction regarding free will and mentally ill people?
Right.
Is that it's not so much the position of the law, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't claim to be an expert, but my understanding of it is that the position of the law is not that mentally ill people do not exercise or have the capacity for will. It's just that because of their malfunctioning interface with reality, they're making decisions on such bad information that they're not criminally culpable. They don't have mens rea, the guilty mind.
Right.
It's a different thing though than being automata.
Yeah. I'm with
So-
you, and
Yeah,
we'll-
these are-
let's pause that here, because
Yeah.
the one thing I said a long time ago is after that 3-hour debate, we don't need to do that on this show because it's kind of got a different purpose.
I
But
can dig it.
I do appreciate the fact that there are people listening, and I know that Dennis and others, we've talked about this a lot in email too. So
Yeah. On the gay rights thing, we are currently going through that in New York, actually.
Oh, uh-huh.
Because, as you may be aware, our governor had to leave office,
Right.
rather colorfully, and he had promised, if he got into office, and his lieutenant governor as well, that they would put the issue up, for consideration, because
Right.
previous governors have not. Well, Mr. Spitzer is back in private life, and his successor is following through on the promise, but the state government zorched it again.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we're hearing all the same nonsense, and recently it's come up again from the usual folks because a higher-up state court decided that since New York, by law, recognizes foreign marriages, including, I believe, same-sex unions,
Right.
because they've recognized foreign marriages, that would include same-sex unions. So if, say, a couple from wherever, Spain,
Right.
comes over here,
Right,
they're
in
still
the
married
Netherlands.
if
Yeah.
they're in New York. Well, the religious conservatives have a real problem with this, and we're hearing the same thing about activist judges
Yeah,
in our own state. And two things about that.
The
Number
old
one,
chestnut of activist judges.
yeah. Two things. First of all, isn't it interesting how judges overnight become activists when they push the buttons of certain factions?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Judge
it's-
Roy Jones in Dover, Pennsylvania, was a Republican-appointed judge who none of the conservative element figured that he could possibly come down against intelligent design, and the minute that he does, he's an activist judge. Let's ignore the fact that he's probably just honest and observant of the law, because it came down in disagreement with him. All of a sudden, he's an activist judge.
Silly name
Indeed,
calling.
yeah. I downloaded the Kitzmiller PDF and I read
Yeah.
the whole thing, and it's a very tightly reasoned decision.
Yeah.
Whether you philosophically agree or disagree, you cannot say that this fellow, as a judicial officer, is exercising bad faith or incompetence. He did his job.
Yeah, I completely
think he did a
agree.
fabulous job. He did great.
And so now the judges in our state are getting the same business. And again, if you read the decision, I believe it was Hernandez, but don't quote me on that. It was the decision about, well, if foreign marriages might be same-sex, and we have to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. If you read the decision, again, it's tight points of state constitutional law. I'm not saying that judges never go off the beam, because obviously sometimes they do. They're people. But in every case where you hear, well, activist judges, et cetera, in almost every case, if you read the decision, you will find precedent law, logical analysis, and this is why I'm deciding this way. You may not agree with it, but it's just slander at some point.
Yeah,
if you decide to scream activism.
Yeah,
you've kind of played into something. You're calling without having seen the show. If you're calling from New York, right?
That is true.
But you've unwittingly played into kind of one of the themes I'm talking about is some of the hysterics that come up, where people are making all these wild claims in order to kind of draw attention away from the fact that they really don't have a case. And I think that this is exactly one of those cases, right, where you're claiming activist judges when in reality they're not activists; they're just disagreeing with you. And you're blowing smoke to try to hide this fact.
There are a number of instances where I completely disagree with rulings that, for example, the U.S. Supreme Court's made, and we talked about one of these, I think briefly on yesterday's Nonprofits, where they basically invented out of whole cloth this idea of fighting words. I disagree with them on that, but I wouldn't say that I'd never accuse them of being activist or legislating from the bench. I think that I understand what their purpose was behind it. It's much in the same way that they kind of backed down on obscenity, where they ruled that we know obscenity when we see it, even though if we're not going to define it. My objection to the fighting words thing is that I think it's much better to promote the idea that everybody's responsible for their actions and reactions, and that there's absolutely no magical words that I could say to you that would prompt you to actually assault me in response. And yet the Supreme Court has set up kind of this protected area where it's possible to, if somebody says something to you that is so offensive that the normal reaction would be to strike back, that you may actually use that as protection. And I don't know that's, I don't think I agree with that.
My problem with fighting words is that to me, and perhaps as an atheist and a deconvert myself from Christianity and Catholicism, I'm just hypersensitive to this, and perhaps not. My problem with it is that I see fighting words as a return of blasphemy under another name.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
The idea that there are some things which here put this in Gothic lettering, may not be uttered.
Right.
Right.
And this has nowhere to the definition of this, like a cloud, has nowhere to go but out. And now it becomes a power struggle of who gets to take their fetish and define it as something which is, if you talk crap about it, is fighting words.
Yep.
I don't see any way to keep this dog in the yard, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree.
It's another example of elevating your ideas to special status, and inhibiting criticism of your ideas. I think that's what it is.
And this is, one more thing. I don't want to hog the phone, but if I may, one more thing. On the previous show, the question came up. Well, if a religious person is relatively socially benign and it accepts the secular basis of the Constitution and the civil contract,
right,
what's the harm? And your point was, well, and I think Randy once famously said that there are very bad consequences to seriously believing in magic and living your life on that accord.
Yes.
My idea of it, my comparison is taking your eyes off the road while you're driving. If you do this, it doesn't mean that you're instantaneously going to smack your car up, but the longer you do it, the more likely it becomes approaching certainty that you will hit something. And if
I'm glad you called, George. You should be on the show with us because you say the things that I think about. I love it.
That's very good.
Cause if you make a conscious decision to not confront the reality of your senses and everything science and empiricism tells you, you at some point will make decisions based on this disconnect. I don't see any way to avoid that. Hopefully, it won't be something that physically hurts you or somebody else.
Yeah.
But even if it's missed opportunity, friends you would never have made, or viewpoints you'd never consider, or
life you never have lived, right?
Gay people, you would never, your friendships you'll never have with gay people because you just can't get over the fact that they have a sexual and romantic attraction that was not thought well of 3,000 years ago in the Bronze Age.
Yeah. And
so you won't know those folks. That's a loss. You've paid a price whether you know it or not.
I couldn't possibly agree more. We're very glad you called in today, George. We're grateful that people up in New York are watching and appreciating the show. Please feel free to send us some email, call in again with feedback and everything else. We got other people in line, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Let's take one more call.
Okay.
And then I'll finish my topic, and then we'll do the rest.
Is it David?
This is David.
How you doing, David?
Doing fine, Matt. How are you?
I'm good.
I miss your Wonder Twin out there today.
My Wonder Twin?
Well, Tracy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But I like Don, too. Don's good.
Okay.
By the way, David.
I'm getting an insecurity complex here.
David, you're actually a Christian caller, right?
That is correct.
Does my caller offend you in any way?
No. I don't get offended by anybody or anything.
Good.
What business do you have to be a Christian if you get offended by everything?
Yeah. So what do you got for us?
That'd be silly. No, everybody's got their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own experiences. That's just life.
Yeah, just some of them are wrong.
Well, whenever you guys get onto topics like this, I stand up and applaud. In fact, you guys are just perfect when it comes to things like this. I couldn't agree with you any more on the kind of things you're talking about. And see, even I, as a Christian, realize what business do Christians have getting out there and trying to control the lives of others, like defending the, quote, institution of marriage, end quote. Mm-hmm. What is the institution of marriage? How does it hurt my marriage when gay people want to get married?
We can't figure it out
answer it either, man.
It doesn't hurt my marriage a bit. And how am I defending my marriage? By controlling their lives.
Yeah.
Now, see, here's the problem with a whole part of Christianity here. It is indicative of. I actually wrote this part down so I wouldn't forget.
Okay.
It is indicative of the proclivity of the Christian organizations like the Christian Coalition or really the whole religious right. And what it is they cross the line from protecting our Christian rights, which is wholly acceptable, to encroaching on the rights of others, actually trying to make non-Christians live and act as if they were.
Yeah.
And that's just flat out wrong. If Christians spent their time loving and serving others like we're supposed to be doing, instead of going out trying to control everyone's lives, maybe people might actually listen a little bit and desire Christianity more. The Christianity that we present to people now is nothing but you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, you're horrible people, repent, go to, you're going to hell and you better listen to me. Well, who wants to listen to that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of diversity out there, and so my question is, there's this claim out there by many Christians that there's an absolute morality that comes from God, and when you have people like you who say one thing and people like the others who we're talking about saying something different, it makes me wonder, do you really believe there's an absolute morality from God, and if so, are you following it or are they following it? Right?
Well, now here's my answer to that, Don.
Okay.
I believe that there is a morality from God, but morality is simply an abstract concept that arises from the very fact that there are cognizant beings, and it is different in the eyes of different people. I mean, we see that just by different cultures.
Okay.
Just the fact that I live by a morality that I believe God has given me doesn't mean that I get to force that morality on others who have a different worldview.
Okay.
I think my only objection is that I think you just said two different things. One being that morality is something that arises from conscious individuals in social interaction. And then the second thing is that you believe that your individual version of morality comes from a God, so that it still places it as something different.
Of course, I realize you don't believe in God.
No, I understand, but I'm saying if in fact your first position is true, that morals and ethics can arise from intelligent beings acting cooperatively as a perfectly natural occurrence, then what is this other thing where you've gotten moral codes from God? Are they, first of all, why would you need to presume that? I mean, I understand you believe it, and perhaps you have good reasons for it. I just see those two things as
there
contradictory,
doesn't
where
have
one
to
is
be a
unnecessary.
God for there to be morality.
Sorry?
There doesn't have to be a God for there to be morality.
I agree with you there.
Now, I believe there happens to be a God, and there happens to be his morality too.
Okay, I got you. I'm clear now.
Yeah, I don't have a big issue with this standpoint that you just gave. I think that makes some amount of sense.
Well, 90% of the time, I agree with what you guys say.
Well, come join us.
You guys,
yeah.
no, really,
which
seriously.
Means 10% of the time
you
you're
guys
wrong.
are very clear thinkers, and I love that about you.
Okay.
Because I argue with my fellow Christians all the time, and so many are not clear thinkers at all.
All right, I appreciate the call, David, and I know you didn't hear the last comment, but I was just poking fun, and I know you understand.
Oh, were you making fun of me?
You said you agreed with us 90% of the time, and I said that's great. That means that there's only 10% of the time that you're wrong.
Here he was complimenting us. No, we appreciate your feedback on that. We do try to raise some points that I think we try to make people think about these things, and we appreciate the feedback that maybe we're doing that.
Absolutely.
So thank you, David.
Appreciate
and
the call,
you make
David.
us all think. That's the point.
And that's my goal. And we get asked about whether we're trying to deconvert people all the time. Sure, I'm happy if somebody abandons their religious belief and embraces reason. But the big goal is to make people think, to get to engage in conversation, discussion, debate. Because I don't think that any positive changes can ever be made without that. So.
And there's so many people out there who are afraid for there to be light shed on their beliefs.
Yeah. I appreciate the call, David. Thank you.
You guys take it easy.
Okay, bye.
I'm going to go ahead and take this one because it's going to clear the lines, and I don't think it's going to take too long.
Okay, good plan.
Kevin, you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Listen, I got a question for you because this has been a big debate about this. I'm a little bit of, I'm with you guys, but I have a conservative tendency in my personality.
Right.
And, these broad issues are certainly legitimate to discuss, which is certainly okay. But I do have a question, and I want to see if you guys have an answer or an approach or whatever.
Go ahead.
It just seems to me a logical consequence of gay marriage, and I'm not against gay marriage, but I do want these kinds of questions discussed. Mm-hmm. What if somebody does, let's say, assume, now, sincerely, not a crazy, not a jerk or a crank, they want to marry their pet,
Okay.
And maybe we should allow that. I understand that. But, let's say you're a policymaker here and you're looking at our society.
I can take this.
And you're thinking, well, you don't know the answer with certainty, I guess. I don't know. But, I'd like to hear your approach to that.
Yeah.
That is a legitimate question that comes up.
It's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed at all to discussing any of these things. I just have yet to hear arguments that I think are very sound on the other side. So how I would answer that is marriage at a sort of fundamental level is a contract between two people to sort of take care of each other. They have special privileges within the society and these sorts of things. And so you have basically, at its fundamental point, it's a contract between two people that have to enter it as sort of conscious adults, right? So if one is coercing another, if it's a shotgun marriage, then that's not a good thing, right? If it's a parent and a child, or a child being coerced into it, that's not a good thing, and we've had that with the Mormons, right? So if it's a dog, the dog cannot give consent because it's not a reasoning human being, right? So you can define marriage as a contract between two people and not have a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right.
There's actually two aspects to this slippery slope thing, and one is what Don's talking about, and the other one is this idea. Well, if we let a man and a woman marry, and then we expand that to allow people of the same sex to marry, what stops us from allowing all these other things? And the answer to that's really simple. We allow people to own handguns and rifles and semi-automatic weapons, but we don't allow them to own automatic weapons and nuclear weapons. We can make an arbitrary stopping point. The slippery slope argument fails because we can decide this is the limit. The big question, or the big issue here is, how do you go about determining what is the best limit to encourage everybody else's freedoms and rights? And I think in this case,
and every time you want to move the line, you have to re-argue it, right? It's not like you get dogs and cats for free when you have gay marriage. They're two different topics.
Yeah, and so my arbitrary point of drawing the line agrees completely with Don. As soon as you have two reasonable consenting adults, I don't care what their genitalia is, they agree to enter a contract to get certain benefits from it. I think that's pretty cut and dried simple. And denying some people the right because they have they're choosing to marry somebody of the wrong gender, I think is an injustice that needs to be corrected. So if somebody comes along and wants to marry their dog, when your dog tells me he consents to it, then we can talk about it. And polygamy comes up a lot with this too.
What about polygamy? How would you answer with that?
I'm not necessarily sure that I'm opposed to polygamy in the sense that as long as we have a contract that is enforceable and that fairly represents all parties, and that everybody enters into it as a consenting adult. It's kind of like the same thing as merging a few businesses. I mean, I realize that this takes away some of the mystique of marriage, but we're really talking about legal rights and contracts. I'm not sure I'm opposed to it, but I wouldn't object to somebody arbitrarily drawing the line at two people and saying, even if their only justification was it's impractical for us to try and deal with multiple marriages that may then incorporate with other multiple marriages. We're just going to do this simply one person and one person. I think I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, given that marriage today is a two-person thing, and you are changing it to potentially expanding it to a different or a broader two-person thing. Yeah. There's all these laws and such around marriage that can be easily adapted for two people. But when you start having multiple people, you really are forced at that point, if you're going to allow marriage of 3 and 5 and 7 people or whatever, then you have to start making very, very different laws. You have to overhaul the whole thing.
Yeah, the overhead could be killer. Can you imagine trying to do a divorce where 7 people are in a marriage and
one person's divorcing 2 of the others, but not the third?
For practicality alone, we can draw an arbitrary line at 2 people.
Okay, I think you've been great. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks.
So you've got more. The lines are open. We got about 30 minutes left in the show, almost exactly. After the program's over, I'd like to remind everybody, and Kevin and anybody who's in town, if you'd like to join us for dinner, we'll be at Threadkills, 301 West Riverside Drive, right there at the bottom of your screen. Show's over in about 30 minutes. We'll get there in about an hour.
Yeah. Well, I always do this. I mean, that was just sort of the preamble is what I've done. I'm really getting down to the meat of the topic, which is kind of a more sophisticated hysteric about gay marriage, and that is that gay rights or equality is a threat to religious freedom. And
oh noes.
I think my take on this is I think this is a patently absurd position. But I've actually seen it in multiple places, and I thought it would be worth addressing. I've seen it in multiple places, people making this sort of claim. So religious freedom, in my mind, is the right to believe any sort of crazy thing you want, right? We have an audience member whose signature line is something like, one person's religion is another person's belly laugh, right? You can believe whatever you want as long as, that's religion, right? But there's this issue of acting on those beliefs in ways that impact other people. I think that's really what the core issue is here. So your victim, if you decide to act on your religious beliefs and go fly a plane into a building and knock it down, your victim has the same right to believe something that may be the exact opposite of what you believe, all right? And he has the same religious rights you do. So in effect, there's this emergent property of equality here that just because everybody has the same right to believe whatever they want and the same limitations on their actions, that is equality. That's how we get to equality. So religious freedom implies equality. They're not at all in conflict with each other. So, and in fact, the person who doesn't believe a particular religion must have actually a stronger right. He must not be coerced into somebody's religious beliefs or yielding to somebody's religious beliefs, especially if somebody is giving that religious claim based on faith. If they have absolutely no evidence at all, say, oh, you just got to believe, well, it's tough. If that's your only evidence, then please leave me out of it. I'm not interested. So when people are saying that gay rights is somehow a threat to religious freedom, they're saying that they want their religious beliefs, based on no evidence whatsoever, to trump the real rights of real human beings out there. And so I think this is like pretty crazy. This whole thing reminds me of Animal Farm. If you've ever read the book by George Orwell, it's a very good book. It's a satire. It's kind of on tyranny. It's about tyranny, and it takes place where a bunch of animals take over the farm. Okay, and so they have a set of commandments where no animal shall kill any other animal, and all animals are created equal. But by the end of the book, you end up with the pigs taking over, and they say that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Nice.
And so it's very, very, very much like that. Is we have the Christians saying, well, there's this equality thing, but gosh, we're better. And you actually hear this in the Sally Kern thing. She had her. This
By
is
the way,
the warrior for Judeo-Christian values. Yeah.
Who is Sally Kern?
She is an Oklahoma lawmaker. She's a state legislator in Oklahoma.
No, she is one of the most ignorant and evil people on the planet.
Okay.
Every
Why do you say that,
time
Matt?
she opens her mouth, she spews some of the most offensive and hateful nonsense. And I think Don has examples of this.
Yeah. So one of the things she says is not all lifestyles are equal, not all religions are equal. So she's playing exactly this game of, there's this equality thing, but that doesn't apply to us.
Oh, you didn't have any of her more hateful comments?
No. All right, we could do a whole show on.
Go look
comments.
up Sally Kern. I'm sure you'll find plenty of quotes. She's a little troll.
She's a troll, but whether or not people are trolls, there's this question of. What are they saying? What is being repeated? What sorts of arguments are getting traction? And right. It's an argument from authority again. Just because she's a troll doesn't mean that what she's saying is invalid. So
she could still be saying something valid. The point, right. and granted, I sunk into ad hominem attacks, and mostly that's just to show how strongly I disagree. If you actually go and look at what she said, and by the way, let me back up. Why should anybody be bothered if I happen to get a little nasty with somebody who's been running around talking about how homosexuals are trying to destroy the world? I mean, nobody'd get mad if I said lousy things about Obama.
Right. Well, especially if you're backing up McCain, why you think it's lousy, right?
Because any other politician who said something that people on one side disagreed with.
Yeah.
You don't have to. I mean, it's one thing to attack somebody's arguments as opposed to them.
She needs to have a thick skin, right?
Yeah. If you're going to go out there and put yourself out in the public and say things that demean other people, large minority groups, if you're going to go out there and pretend to take the moral high ground and be this champion of Americanism or whatever crock you're trying to feed us today that places you as the moral authority over everybody else while spouting hateful nonsense about people that you don't like just because their sex life is a little different from yours, or they don't believe that there's a God there, or they don't happen to agree with every stupid opinion you have. I don't think you're deserving of really having your arguments discussed and treated as if you made actual arguments. I'm not aware that Sally Kern has actually supported any of her positions with a rational argument. I think that everything is just, this is the way it is, and I think this because God thinks this. Well, if that's the best your argument gets, then I'd rather not even discuss it and just call you a troll and move on.
Right. Well, we do have an article here. This is published in the Statesman on Thursday, June 19th, quite a long time ago. And this is actually what got me kind of hot and bothered about this topic. There's a guy by the name of Mark Stern who wrote an article that appeared as an editorial. He wrote it originally in the Los Angeles Times, and it's pretty easy to look up on the web. Will gay rights trample our religious freedom? And it's interesting because he's the general counsel of the American Jewish Congress. So we're not talking necessarily...
Oh, so he's part of the conspiracy with the ACLU and the Jews and the atheists.
Well, we're not necessarily talking about a Christian here. I imagine he's Jewish. He certainly works for a Jewish organization. So
this is propaganda to throw us off the track.
Propaganda.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So this isn't necessarily Christians, by the way, making these sorts of things. I think this is religious conservatives. So he's bemoaning the fact that equal protection is infringing on the free exercise of religion. And he says religious rights are likely to be obliterated by an emerging popular majority supporting same-sex relationships. So he's making the exact same sort of claim. So he actually provides...
Does he say how?
Yeah, he provides some evidence here. He says, well, there's these 4 situations that have occurred where gay rights trumped religious freedom, and this is an awful thing. This guy, I think, qualifies for fractally wrong if you actually dive into his arguments, but I want to try to keep it short today. He gave 4 examples, and I want to go through them quickly. The first one I'm going to take more time on because it's more interesting. First example was, quote, a San Diego County fertility doctor was sued by refusing to perform artificial insemination on one partner of a lesbian couple for religious reasons. The doctor referred the patient to a colleague, promised there would be no extra cost, and offered to care for her during the subsequent pregnancy. This case is before the California Supreme Court, and justices seemed hostile to the doctor's defense during oral arguments last month. So this is the first case. And here's my analysis of it, is his religious beliefs with regard to fertility of lesbians is completely arbitrary. There is no holy book that covers fertility, aiding or abetting fertility of lesbians anywhere, right? So he's making this up, right? He could have just as easily had a religious opinion that said, oh, this is an immaculate conception, this is a good thing, I'm going to help it out. So his decision is completely arbitrary, all right? So effectively, he's using his religious convictions as a means to mess with somebody else and justify whatever he wants to do. So he's using religion as an excuse. So how about if we had a doctor that messed with fertility of green-eyed people because he was convinced that they were reptilian overlords, and that was his sincere religious belief? Would we allow that? Would these people support that? I don't think so. What about if we had a gay gynecologist who was suppressing Christians from having children? Would his religious rights be protected here? I don't think so, right? You know, this is somebody promoting their arbitrary beliefs. So really, I see this as an issue of contract law. Did the patient know about this restriction before getting involved in a relationship, in a service relationship with this doctor, right? I think this doctor did a bait and switch on this person and advertised himself as a plain old doctor providing a plain old service in this area, and when this lesbian came in and he found out, he pulled out this restriction from out of the blue. So consumers have the rights to know whether they're getting an inferior service or not. I view this as a consumer rights issue, right? The doctor's doing a bait and switch. He's pretending to be one thing and he's actually another. If he had a sign on his front door that said, you know, I don't provide fertility services to whatever because of my sincere religious beliefs, more power to him, but the market is going to decide on whether or not, you know, he's going to make any business.
Yeah,
so this is not a gay rights issue. This is a contract issue, in my opinion.
I was trying to figure out where I actually came down on this because, you know, certainly he has the right to act in accordance with his religious beliefs.
He has the right to have his religious beliefs, right.
Yeah, so if there was already a contract and a bait and switch thing, then yeah, I would definitely support suing him. And I would agree with you that if this was made known ahead of time that I'm sorry, but I don't provide fertility treatments to, you know, lesbian couples.
Right.
Okay.
So I haven't researched the details of this case,
cool,
but it is a contract issue. I think more than any more.
I don't see how they could sue otherwise.
It's more than that than a gay rights issue. Okay, the second example. Let me go through them real quick. We have
if anything, what I think they would sue for is he promised them it wouldn't be an extra charge. He's going to refer them to a colleague, and then what? Is he going to continue to treat them after the pregnancy? But basically, they should not be encouraged to siphon any money to this guy. It should all go to the other. So maybe there is a really good reason for the suit.
Yeah. So I to be honest, I should have looked up that case. But Okay, so the next one, Catholic Charities in Boston and San Francisco ended adoption services altogether rather than be compelled by anti-discrimination laws to place children with same-sex couples.
Oh, good job.
Right.
This goes back to something we talked about yesterday. You self-righteous, sanctimonious assholes. There are... Rather than worry about placing kids with loving couples you just decide, screw the kids entirely. If we can't put them where we want, they don't get anything. This is exactly the same as this Christian organization that we talked about on Nonprofits yesterday that threatened to withdraw its support for a cancer charity because the Jerry Springer the Opera show tried to donate 3,000 pounds to them. And they basically said, no, that's an offensive show. And if you take money from them, we're not going to support you anymore. We're the bigger money. Look how much we love and care. Yeah, you're an ass.
Yeah.
When people ask, what's the harm? That's the harm.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, cool, it's nice that somebody that we disagree with, perhaps somebody that's offensive, has taken time out to donate. The charitable organization, by the way, is at fault here as well. It's not just the morons at the church who tried to blackmail them. The charitable organization should have stood up to them and said, no, I'm sorry, we're here trying to actually help people, and we're willing to take money from any organization, regardless of whether or not you happen to agree with them. And if you disagree with this, if you think it's so important that all of our money comes from sources that you approve and decide to pull your funding, that's your prerogative, and we can talk about it on the nightly news where you're going to look like morons. You're going to look like evil people who are more concerned with your precious image, because evidently your God's too weak to protect your image, than you are about the people who are actually dying of cancer. Yeah. Than you are about the kids who need to be adopted.
Yeah.
How dare you even pretend to hold the moral high ground while you're doing something like that? You're an ass. No other way about it.
So yeah,
what's the next case?
My analysis of this is this Catholic Charities dealing with adoption. This is a state regulation issue, and the state has an interest in regulating how children are adopted and how these sorts of things happen, and the church clearly has a conflict of interest here. So, and anybody with a conflict of interest when the state is involved in, providing a service for children or whatever, then that deserves some scrutiny, and this is not a gay issue. This is a state regulation issue. Third case, a Lutheran school in Riverside County, California was sued in 2005 under California's Unruh Act, which forbids discrimination by businesses for expelling 2 students who allegedly were having a lesbian relationship, those evil lesbians, in contravention of the religious views of the school. This case was thrown out in January, but students have appealed. Okay, I view this as a consumer protection issue. If you have a business providing a service that reneges on their their services, then they could potentially be sued. Right? This is sort of the state is in the business of regulating schools. And again, this is not a gay rights issue, in my opinion, right?
When you start kicking out, what if a couple girls are walking along campus holding hands? You going to kick them out too?
Yeah. Fourth issue, public school officials in Poway, California have unsuccessfully barred students from wearing T-shirts that registered their opposition to homosexuality on campus. A lawsuit made its way to the U.S. Supreme Court before being dismissed as moot because the students had graduated, but another federal lawsuit is pending. So I see this as not a gay rights issue, but an issue of students' free speech rights and whether or not the school can create an environment that's productive for education, which is what they're about. And what if the situation were reversed? What if we had gangs of gay students going around beating up or making my lives miserable for Christians? Would you really want that? Would you really want to have an environment where we have gangs, effectively, groups of thugs going out in schools and
this is perfect. T-shirts, straight as crooked, and they all run around with bent pipes, chasing all the people who aren't gay.
Right. So this Mark Stern, there's some other stuff in here that's worth going after, but I want to try to keep this short. Mark Stern is advocating that religious belief is exempt from the believer from contract law, state regulation, consumer protection issues, and that believers have a special right to persecute others. And he's blaming gays because those rights are being denied.
Yeah.
So there's an irony here that he says, this, very briefly, he's talking about the fact that he's kind of sad that even religion has gotten trampled by race issues and racial rights. And the irony is that, here he is, somebody who's a Jew potentially, who is advocating for religious persecution, such as happened during the Holocaust, based on the majority rules. Anyway, so there's a lot of bluster going on, and a lot of hysterics, and a lot of crazy arguments and stuff that just don't make a whole lot of sense. So what's the explanation behind this? Why are Christian conservatives and other religious conservatives out to get gays? I think there are 3 reasons. I'll hit them very quickly, and then we can take the last caller and get some more callers. First off, we have vilification of gays for money and power. Effectively, the gays are the new Jews. It used to be well practiced to go after the Jews and steal their money and persecute them and vilify them because they were Jesus killers and all that crap, right?
You could also say that gays are the new blacks.
Yeah.
Except that we're not actually making you guys do our work.
So this is the business thing. They're in it for money and power, and having an enemy is a good thing. There are 2 very good articles on this. One, both of them from the Southern Poverty Law Center. One is called Holy War, which is about the business of vilifying gays and how that's been a big moneymaker for the religions. There's another one called The Fabulist that's about a guy named Paul Cameron, who's one of the big pseudoscientists making up all sorts of crap, pseudoscientific crap about gays, and he's being funded by these folks.
The important thing of this, talking about the ability to make money, is if you notice those extreme Christian organizations that went after mythical Satanist groups. This happened a lot in the early 80s. You had Mike Warnke and a bunch of other frauds. Hi, Mike. Sending out this idea that Satanists were all around trying to take over. So there you've got a fictitious enemy, and it didn't quite work. It fell by the wayside rather quickly. I don't see a whole lot of shows talking about how there are Satanist cabals in universities who are perverting our youth. Instead, they pick on, instead of having this imaginary enemy, they take someone else and mold them to be an enemy. And in this case, they take homosexuals or atheists or whoever happens to be handy that they can actually point to. Liberals. Oh, that Unitarian Universalist church. I'm probably not going to talk about it on today's show. We talked about it on yesterday's Nonprofits quite a bit, actually. So if you go download that, you can hear a little bit more about that UU shooting.
Okay. So if gays become mainstream, the religious folks lose an enemy, and they therefore lose money and power. So it's frightening to the people who make money and do no useful work, but just are demagogues. It's frightening to them because they're going to lose their jobs, or their jobs, in scare quotes. The second thing is religions want to shape family and society structure. In the sense of family, they want to have a hierarchical family where the father decides things, the mother obeys, and the children learn to be little robots. And this is an authoritarian household, and this is a topic of my December 2006 show, if you want to look that up and watch it.
Yeah, and to be fair, when we're talking about these, and we kind of use broad terms like religion wants to, or religions want to, or Christians want to, we're talking about specific groups. We're talking about the groups who are in direct opposition to this. We completely realize, and you don't have to email us on this, that there are, and David on the show is a prime example of this, who called in earlier, that there are plenty of Christians who don't necessarily agree with this, that there are plenty of theists of different ideas, and not everybody's promoting the same thing.
Yeah, and so the people that have this sort of hysteric attitude towards gays, I think that's where you really see this sort of thing. So equality is a threat to a family where you have this hierarchical structure and children who are taught to be sort of obeying zombies, right? At a societal level, we have the church. The church has traditionally wanted to place itself above kings in this hierarchical structure. And equality is completely at odds with this hierarchical structure. The church wants to tell people they want believers who are followers, who follow God and effectively follow the religious leaders, and therefore, people who are equal and people who can think for themselves are a threat to this whole family and society structure that they're trying to create. That is not necessarily a good one. It's a good one if you want to control people. It's not a good one for the people being controlled.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why they're hysterical. Finally, and I think this is the most interesting one, and there's gay rights is a wedge issue in churches. And so what you're going to see is when you start allowing people to marry, the gays wanting to enter churches to get married, the churches end up in this awful situation of either allowing it or disallowing it, but they have to make a decision. And they have to kind of go back and explain to their people why they're making this decision. They have to put a stake in the ground, and they have to argue that if they allow marriage, they have to say, oh, we're going to throw out the Bible yet again. We threw it out with slavery. We're going to throw out the Bible yet again with gay stuff. And it begs the question of why have a Bible at all? Or if they go with the Bible, they have to explain, well, why did we decide one way on slavery and another way on this other thing?
They pick one passage over another.
Right.
We're going to ignore this one over here that says if a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, it's an abomination and they should be put to death. And we're going to instead focus on love thy neighbor and turn the cheek.
Right. So it's going to have to be a lot of spin, and people are going to read their Bible, and that's a terrible thing for religions, for people to go read that.
You want to anyway? You want to help somebody be an atheist? Tell them to start reading the Bible.
So what will happen is we'll see in all sorts of churches, we'll see kind of a holy war where people will take sides on this issue because it is a contentious issue. And we've seen that play out in the Anglican Church, the Episcopalian Church.
It's going nuts in the UK right now.
Is it?
Based on what some people have sent me an email, fights over whether or not women should be ordained, whether or not gays should be ordained. You know, they've found something to fight about, and evidently there's quite the row over there.
And there's going to be a lot of schisms, and churches are going to break up, and people are going to leave the church. So we're going to have sort of a loss of power or loss of importance of the church because you know, this is back to this absolute morality thing. You know, if you can't make up your mind about issue X and half your church goes one way, half your church goes another way, that sort of defeats in a very real way any sort of moral authority that you have. If you can't, you know, decide this issue, and it is a contentious issue, and therefore the churches are going to suffer for this. So all the bluster about gays and silly arguments and all this hysterics is just concealing the fact that the church has some very deep problems in store for dealing with gay rights issues as it comes through. They're going to lose money, they're going to lose power, they're going to lose their stranglehold over society, and they're going to all get divided up into pieces. And it's too bad that there's no God helping them out.
Bummer. Gays are going to destroy your church. And you know why?
So they're going to destroy it.
Because it needs to be destroyed.
But
the problem is in
the
church. The problem is in the church, in the religion, in the dogma, in the mindset, and it needs to be changed. It's one of those things where we talked about earlier. Tell us what Americanism is and why it's a bad thing that it's going away. We looked up what it is. I'm not sure if it's a bad thing that it goes away or not. But I'll tell you what I think, and that is bigotry is a bad thing, and it needs to go away.
Meddling with other people is a bad thing.
In your church, too, and it exists within the ACA. There's nobody, at least I have not met anybody, who doesn't have some little trace of bigotry about something. Some nugget of insensitivity, of xenophobia, of us versus them, that can play into decisions that they make. And the one thing that I've done, and I haven't resolved this completely, I'm sure there are plenty of things that I still need to fix, is try to recognize when I'm making decisions that are based on things like that, so that I'm not acting out of bigotry, out of prejudice, out of ignorance, that I'm making informed decisions, that I'm trying to do the right thing and treat people the way we should all be treated, so, with fairness and equality. When your church goes under, when your religion falls by the wayside because it was ill-equipped to deal with a changing reality, I realize that some of you are going to be very distraught over this. Take stock in what's really been eliminated. We've said many times before that we understand religions and churches do good things. Let's keep the good parts and chuck the bad parts. Let's keep what's real.
Let's cut loose the baggage
and get rid of the bad of what's not real. Yeah. There's absolutely no. I mean, we've built universities. We can use the elements of religion. The elements of religion that are good exist outside of religion. There's no positive thing within religion that is exclusive to your particular dogma or theology. And the fact that many different religions can get together in times of crisis and stop fighting with each other long enough to gang up on some common enemy, like the gays or the blacks or the Jews or the atheists, demonstrates that there's something that unites us. And what you guys need to realize is that it actually unites all of us. Chuck out the dogma, chuck out the superstition, chuck out the baggage, and let's get on with improving life for everybody. Let's work towards a better world, and don't mourn the loss of your silly superstitions that you have no justification for anyway. The truth has nothing to fear from investigation. The truth has nothing to fear from gays. The truth has nothing to fear from atheists. It either stands or falls, period. But we got one last caller and just a couple minutes left, so I want to get to this. Is it Chuck on the line?
Yes.
How you doing, Chuck?
Thanks for waiting.
How are you? Fine. I have a history question. How did this country get behind the Jews as much as it has?
I think the Holocaust was the big thing. I think that when I just watched Band of Brothers on the HBO special about World War II, and I think that when the Nazi concentration camps were discovered, I think that really kind of changed a lot of people, and a lot of people, I think, came to realize that maybe the traditional Christian hatred of the Jews was not a good thing, and maybe the fact that Hitler was doing these things for these reasons. By the way, he was motivated by Martin Luther's anti-Semitism.
And sponsored by the Catholic Church.
Sponsored by the Catholic Church. We did a show on that. I think that really was sort of religion hitting a brick wall and saying maybe we shouldn't be persecuting these people. And I think that you began to see this beginnings of this Judeo-Christian, there are little brothers and such, and oh, by the way, let's go gang up on Islam.
Yeah.
So I think that was the beginning of it. I think that there was a really sort of honest and sincere concern for these people who were so terribly persecuted, right? But then it became more than that, right? Then I think the Jews have done a very good job of turning this persecution into, if you say anything bad about Israel or Judaism, you're an anti-Semite, and you're just like Hitler. I think they've done a good job of parlaying that into much more than it deserved to be. So it's a complex issue.
We are out of time. And thanks to Chuck for calling. I apologize that we couldn't get more detail on that, but feel free to call again next week. We'll be back on. Join us at Threadgill's in a few minutes for a little dinner. We'll see you again next week. There's the list of the crew, and can they show themselves? They got the camera.
There they are. And
we'll see you next week.
We have a good studio audience, too. Thanks for the callers.
Question everything, nothing sacred, challenge authority, and
question
really
us.
Think about what you're doing. Yeah, question me. Send me an email. Tell me where I'm wrong, since you were afraid to call in.
Uh-oh. What's that? Uh-oh. It's just plastic.